Good afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting of the Board of Public Utilities for the City of Santa Rosa to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Board Member Wright?
Here.
Board Member Watts?
Here.
Board Member Walsh is absent. Board Member Bartholow? Here. Board Member Badenfort is absent. Vice Chair Arnone?
Here.
And Chair Galvin.
Here.
Okay, let the record reflect that all board members are present with the exception of board members Badenfort and Walsh.
Thank you. Move to item 2 on the agenda, statements of abstention.
Thank you, Board Chair. I am going to recuse myself from items 5.2 and 5.3 to avoid any actual or perceived conflicts of interest stemming from my employment at the Sonoma County Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau advocates on behalf of its members, and some of our members contract with Santa Rosa Water for delivery of recycled water. And because Santa Rosa Water's agriculture reclamation system can potentially be very consequential to farmers more generally. Out of an abundance of caution, I will be stepping down from the dais and exiting council chambers when those 2 agenda items come up.
Thank you, Board Member Bartholow. I don't believe we have any other statements of abstention. We have no study session. We'll move now to item 4.1, which is the approval of the minutes from April 20th, 2023. We'll take public comments now on item 4.1. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Montoya.
Okay. So there's no one making their way to the podium in chamber. There are no hands raised on Zoom, and no email or voicemail public comments were received.
Very good. The minutes will be approved and entered. We'll now move to item 5.1, which is the water supply update. Director Burke.
Thank you, Chair Galvin and members of the board. Our first staff briefing is the water supply update, and Peter Martin, Deputy Director, Water Resources, will be making the presentation.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Galvin, members of the board. Very happy to provide you with a brief water supply update today. And, you know, we're still getting some sprinkles, so definitely the water year is not over yet. So I'll start with Lake Pillsbury storage. At my last water supply update, I gave the update that PG&E had recently done some seismic evaluations and determined that they would have to keep the storage low by no longer rolling up their radial arm gates. This obviously limits their ability to store water. Usually during this time of year in the spring, they would be rolling up those gates, which would allow them to store additional water. So what you'll see this year is that they will be holding storage much lower than they have typically done so in the summer and in the spring. So from this point forward, maximum capacity will be at just under 74% of the capacity for Lake Pillsbury. And so that's around 60,000 acre feet or just below. So there'll be, I guess in total, that's about a difference of 20,000 acre feet typically, which they'd be able to additionally store through the use of those temporary operations with those radial arm gates. So, you know, obviously has an impact on the ability to continue to move water into the Russian River watershed throughout the year. Thankfully, there is quite a bit of runoff continuing, so there's no expected shortages this year, but just something to consider is that they are not expecting to change their operations in the future, and there may be some additional requests forthcoming for FERC to change their operations into the future in light of the seismic issues they've identified. And then storage in Lake Mendocino is just under about 100,000 acre feet. They are taking full advantage of the forecast-informed reservoir operations additional storage pool. Right now, they're matching the inflow and outflow at about 145 cubic feet per second. And just something to note is that up until about a week ago, the Army Corps was making all the decisions in terms of the releases related to the flood control pool. As you can see from that graph, they are now within the normal operations, and they handed the decision-making for releases back to Sonoma Water as of last week. So, and then in terms of storage in Lake Sonoma, things are looking very good. About 263,700 acre feet in storage. This is about 18,000 acre feet above their normal water storage pool, taking full advantage of their their forecast-informed reservoir operations, and also the the minor deviation that they had requested for this year. So taking full advantage of the additional flows this year and storing more water than they normally would, obviously as a learning exercise too, going forward for potential changes in operations going forward. So, and then just to note, alternatively, compared to Lake Mendocino, the Army Corps does continue to operate and make decisions for those releases from Lake Sonoma right now. So, and then I just want to note that on April 28th, Sonoma Water did file an upcoming temporary use change petition, which they hope to have in place beginning on June 1st. Alternatively to what has occurred over the last few years related to trying to preserve as much storage in the reservoirs, they now are into the situation where water year classification is normal, which based upon their in-stream flow requirements of their water rights, puts them in a situation where they are out of compliance with the federal biological opinion issued in 2008. So they will be requesting relief from those in-stream flow requirements and reducing their minimum in-stream flow requirements in the upper and Russian River. That will last from the term of June 1st through October 31st. Obviously, there's some considerations for the protection of federally and threatened listed endangered species. This allows for the conditions for them to thrive. And you may have seen many of the advertisements, both electronic and also in print and elsewhere, over the past month or so. The partnership and the city of Santa Rosa Water has been focused on a thank you campaign for the customers, thanking them for conserving throughout the drought, letting them know that we are back in normal water conditions. There's never any water to waste, but we are definitely appreciative of their efforts in helping us get through this drought. So you'll continue to see this out in the community over the next month or two, and then we'll move into our typical summer campaign for water use efficiency. Just a reminder, the eco-friendly garden tour is coming up on Saturday, May 13th. A lot of very exciting different garden locations throughout Sonoma and Marin counties. 5 of those 17 gardens in total are located here in Santa Rosa. The water use efficiency team will be staffing a booth at a garden in Coffey Park as part of the fire rebuild. So you can interact with our staff as you go out and see these gardens throughout the community. It is quite an effort. Many of these gardens also you can learn more information online at the Saving Water Partnership website, where they've broken down each individual garden. And within Santa Rosa, the UC Master Gardeners, the California Native Plant Society, and Laguna de Santa Rosa Foundation will all be sponsoring different sites throughout Santa Rosa. So those are our partners here within Santa Rosa. And some very exciting news. On April 21st, the Bureau of Reclamation made the preliminary announcements regarding their water efficiency Water and Energy Efficiency Grant Program through the Water Smart program. In total, they are proposing $140 million in grants in 15 states for 84 different projects. One of those is an award to the Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership for a water use efficiency program, a regional water use efficiency program totaling $4.4 million. They will be awarding $2 million in grant funds. The other agencies will have to come up with matching grant funds. But for Santa Rosa Water, there is a carve out of about just a little bit less than $1 million to fund the expansion of a direct install program. So where we launched the funding through the funding from the state, a direct install program this year, we are looking to do that. We will now be able to increase that substantially. So combined with that funding, we're looking at about 4,300, right now it's very preliminary, but that's the good target, different direct installs throughout the city. So obviously the economies of scale work out when you have larger amounts of funding going into the program. So staff are very excited, working very hard to get that up and running. We're awaiting a check from the state at some point here in the coming months. So look forward to that. If the public wants to learn about the program, they can go to srcity.org/toilet and sign up for updates too on that program as well. With that, I'm happy to take any questions the board may have at this time.
Thank you, Deputy Director Martin. Any questions or comments from the board? Board Member Bartholow?
Thank you for the presentation. They're always great. You said that Lake Pillsbury, the storage maximum now will be under 74%, which totals about 20,000 acre feet that will just continue to flow and not be behind the dam because of the seismic problems. So pardon me if this is naive and a silly question, but does that water flow then down into Lake Mendocino and remain captured there?
So it would continue down the Eel River. Van Arsdale is downstream of Lake Pillsbury, where it does get diverted into the East Fork of the Russian River. So that water currently is bypassing. It would impact for the Eel River potentially later year releases, because the goal by raising those gates is to store water, additional water in the spring, and allow them to continue to carry flow. So it could possibly impact later in the year as the side stream channel flows diminish, the ability to make up that water later. So it's an additional push that they don't have in the years. But yeah, so the diversion to the upper Russian River is downstream of Lake Pillsbury, so the water can't flow.
Thank you.
Any other board member
Chair
questions?
Galvin, if I could just add, so in terms of the 20,000 acre feet, only a very small portion is diverted through. The overwhelming majority goes to the Eel.
Thank you. Any other board member questions or comments? Board Member Wright?
Thank you for the presentation. Just once more to reiterate the congratulations on these grants for these toilets. That's fantastic. 4,300 toilets, that's a lot of water that we will be saving, and I'm sure customers will appreciate it. So thank you for that.
Thank you. All right, we'll now open it up for public comment on item 5.1. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Montoya?
There's no one in chamber wishing to make a public comment, no hands raised on Zoom, and no email or voicemail public comments were received.
Thank you. That'll conclude item 5.1. We'll now move to item 5.2, our recycled water supply update. Director Burke?
Thank you, Chair Galvin and members of the board. As you mentioned, 5.2 is our recycled water supply update staff briefing. And Mike Prinz, our Deputy Director of Regional Water Reuse Operations, will be making the presentation.
Oops. Thanks, Samantha. Here to give you an update on recycled water conditions in the regional system. Starting out with a couple of photos for context. The photo on the left is actually a photo I have shown in a previous presentation. That photo was taken in September of last year, towards the end of the season, the irrigation season ultimately, when we're really pulling water out of the ponds. And the photo on the right was taken yesterday or possibly the day before yesterday, just to show conditions were quite full. That photo, frankly, leaves a little bit to be desired because it doesn't look like the pond is completely full, but it is actually approaching the overflow riser elevation of the pond. And it's worth keeping in mind that that is just a portion of Pond D, and we have numerous ponds. Pond D is one of our larger ponds. Delta Pond is about 6 miles away. It's also similarly full. But the point is, we're at peak storage levels right now, ultimately. This is the recycled water storage curve, which I've shown many times before. I think you're probably familiar with the general components of the graph. The red line in the more or less the center, the red trend shows the sawtooth pattern that comes about when we discharge. We have discharged this season, and I'll get into a little bit more detail about that later. But ultimately, I just wanted to point out that right now our storage levels are leveling off. We are relatively high in storage. We're above average, but we are not at our upper limit. And actually, we are below maximums for this time of year. But ultimately, things are looking pretty good as far as storage is concerned. This is a chart that we update every month, and it shows our recycled water production. The current year is the black line that has almost like an M shape in the middle of it. The red dotted line is last year's trend. And effectively what this shows you is January was a pretty high production month, February was not, and March has turned out to be actually a little higher than January. This trend it's one number per month. It's the total volume produced in the month divided by the number of days in the month to get an average daily flow rate, and then it is smoothed. So flows through the plant and through the system don't necessarily follow such a smooth trend, but it's done just to more or less communicate differences between months. In the background, all the spaghetti charts or plots are historical individual year trends, just to put things sort of visually in the context of the overall trends that have occurred over 1986 to 2021. So as I mentioned, we have discharged. I think we're very unlikely to discharge any more this season. The window is actually closing rapidly. So far this year, we have discharged nearly 700 million gallons. I want to emphasize that due to our great working relationship with Calpine has been willing to take extra flow rate, which has reduced our discharge and kept our storage curve from getting too high. So Calpine, in my opinion, deserves a little bit of a kudos for their flexibility in terms of working with us. And I think that's pretty characteristic for Calpine. They do coordinate with us very, very well in terms of being flexible about taking flow rates to help us reduce discharge volumes and keep our storage curve in as close to the sweet spot as possible. So I want to draw some attention to that. Nonetheless, we have discharged 697 million gallons, and as you all know, that results in consumption of nutrient credits, phosphorus credits specifically. The 697 million gallon volume equates to nearly 10,300 pounds of phosphorus, which is a 1-to-1 relationship with the credits that we use. That leaves us with about a third of the balance of credits that we started the discharge season with. And to my knowledge, we do have a project or two in the works to get more credits. But nonetheless, we still have a third of the credits remaining that we started the season with. Just to put this season's discharge into context, I updated a chart that we have that shows discharge volumes from 2010 through 2023. And I want to draw your attention to a trend that you're probably already somewhat aware of, but in many years we don't discharge at all, which I think is a great thing, and I think everyone in the room probably agrees is a great thing. It's a unique aspect of our system. But this year is not the largest in the last, let's just say roughly 10 years, but it is maybe I think it's the third largest discharge that we've had over that time frame. With a few of the preceding years as zero discharge years. So moving forward into an outlook into the 2023 irrigation season, I wanted to talk a little bit about allotments for our agricultural customers. We're currently planning on a 1.45 billion gallon allotment. That's 28% higher than the use that all of our agricultural customers used in aggregate in 2022, which was 1.13 billion gallons. So having a wet winter does give us the ability to allocate larger volumes to our agricultural customer base. Allotments are going to be available through September 30th, 2023. September 30th is a typical end of the irrigation season cutoff, after which point we would then work on adjusting flow rates to the geysers to adjust our storage volume and storage levels to prepare for the oncoming winter. So September 30th is a pretty key date as far as our allotment program is concerned. And we are going to continue to allow transfers of allotments between customers if some customers don't think that they'll use all their allotments and other customers need greater allotments. We are allowing that again this year, but we do require a written request to be issued so that we can document who is transferring what allotment to whom. And then we have numerous city farms that we irrigate, and we tend to use city farm irrigation volumes as a little bit of an adjustment factor if we need to make sure that we're doing our best to maximize allotments for agricultural customers. And based on the conditions that we're looking at right now in terms of geysers, delivery, and storage volumes, we do anticipate irrigating city farms. We also are going to be taking another hard look at the numbers coming up pretty soon, and maybe making some adjustments in our allotment, which would be an increase if we do make an adjustment, but we're not ready to do that yet. But the sooner we do it, the better, because our agricultural customers plan their seasons based on the allotments that we're communicating to them. So the earlier they know, the more informed decisions they can make about purchasing hay and things like that. So that's just a little bit of an update regarding recycled water, and I would be more than happy to answer questions if you have any.
Thank you, Deputy Director Prinz. Any board member questions or comments? Vice Chair Arnone?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. First of all, it appears we have like 5,300 and some odd credits left. Is there an expiration date on any of those credits?
Jennifer Burke may need to answer that because it depends on the credits, and I think some things have changed recently.
Sure, thank you, Vice Chair Arnone. So some of our credits do have a certain life, and so we are looking to spend those credits first so that we make sure they don't expire. You also may recall we had brought forward an agreement to you all a couple of board meetings ago to be able to sell credits to Windsor. Anything we look to sell to them would also be what expires first. When we worked with the regional board to change the water quality trading framework, there are now certain conditions on public properties where, publicly owned properties where there's environmental uplift, where those credits actually would basically not expire until we use them, and they're the perpetual, I can't remember the acronym, but they're the PPEEPs is what we refer to them. And so they actually have the long credit life that we can, in essence, freeze and use when we need to. So we will always look to spend the ones that are expiring first to make sure we don't lose any credits and keep the other ones until we need to use them.
Great, thank you. I mean, given the fact that we use more than half of what we have this year, I think it behooves us to conserve all the credits we can and acquire more as soon as possible. The second question I had to do with the cooperation received from Calpine to accept greater flows. Does that give us a bank against which we can, tap in later when we might need to decrease the flows to Calpine, or is that a one-shot deal that doesn't go into the calculus?
Oh, no, it goes into the calculus. That volume counts, and we're actually 28% ahead of schedule, if you will. That will allow us to make a forecast for the summer in terms of flows, and there are certain operational conditions that Calpine would prefer to not go below a certain flow rate, and so we just figure out a schedule more or less for the summer to show what flow rate, and we'll be down to you can call it a 40% flow rate period during the summer, and we may be able to extend that longer as a result of having effectively over-delivered, but that volume does count towards the overall delivery. I would expect, based on the conditions that we're looking at right now, and the potential for ag allotments to not be completely used, we may be delivering more than usual by the end of the year to Calpine, because after September 30th, as I mentioned, we may increase flow rates to Calpine to lower our storage curve to make room for the oncoming winter flows. So a lot remains to be seen, but definitely that 28% excess delivery so far does count towards the contract volume.
Thank you. That answers my question. Thank you.
Any other board member questions? Board member Wright?
Just one follow-up on Board Member Arnone's question. So we needed 10,000 credits this year, and we only got 5,000 left, and it's difficult to get projects built and all that sort of thing. So next year we need 10,000 again. We're 5,000 short. Do we just pay a fine for that, or is there a grace period until we develop more credits, or how does that work?
Well, we are working on developing some credits right now, but in terms of some of those details, Director Burke would probably want to chime in.
Actually, I noticed that Sean McNeil is on, so if we could promote him, I'd let him answer directly, but I will let you know, as Deputy Director Prinz mentioned, we've reinvigorated Sonoma RCD to look at projects for us. We've had an agreement with them to look at various projects, and then we're also working with Sonoma Water on another restoration reach that should give us quite a bit of credits. So I know that Deputy Director McNeil's been working very closely with Sonoma Water on that. And then I believe we have some averages that we are allowed to calculate in terms of compliance, but I am going to turn it over to the expert, as Sean should be able to answer that question for you.
Great. So that was a great question. Thank you, Chair Galvin and members of the board. So we do have, as Director Burke mentioned, we have a number of projects lined up both for next year and for future years. We're beginning that development. We are not able to average anymore with our credits, so we do need to have the credits in hand. Also, we have approximately 700 credits annually coming in from projects we've already done. Excuse me. And that means, so 10,000 credits was kind of a larger size of our discharge. We plan on about an average of 3,500 credits per year, And then while we're low, we're trying to build credits at a rate where about 5,000 credits per year, so that we'll have some kind of a differential to make us on the safe side, so that we don't have to be in the unfortunate position to discharge more phosphorus than we have credits to cover. So our compliance, excuse me, our compliance is completely built on getting the credits in advance and then lining up projects that can be turned on within a year or two, so that we can develop those credits. We are also going after projects that have lifetime usage, meaning that that the credits would be good until we use them, so in perpetuity, and those are so far have been approved by the regional board, and so we're continuing to develop those types of projects over others, but we're lining up any and all projects that we could do to have those available to get started, should we need additional credits beyond what we're using on average.
Thank you. This is certainly a question I wouldn't have asked last year or the year before. Thank you for your response.
Sure.
Any other board member questions or comments? If not, we'll open it up for public comment on item 5.2. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Montoya?
Okay, and there's no one in chamber wishing to make public comment, no hands raised on Zoom, and no voicemail or email public comments were received.
Very good. That will conclude item 5.2. We'll now move to item 5.3, which is the Russian River Water Forum update. And for that report, I will introduce Director Burke.
All right, thank you very much. Been a while since I've been on this side of the table. Good afternoon, Chair Galvin and members of the board. I'm here today to give you an update on the Russian River Water Forum. You may recall that in late 2022 and about October 2022, we came before the board and then ultimately went in front of the City Council to provide an update on this action that was looking to take place, led by Sonoma Water, to see if we could find some type of solution to the Potter Valley project, which PG&E decided not to relicense, and ultimately they're going through a license surrender and decommissioning. When we brought that forward, we asked for some policy direction from both the board and the council as to how we would provide input on City of Santa Rosa's interests related to interviews that were occurring, to see if there was interest in forming some type of work group or other type of process where we could look to find solutions. Based on those initial interviews of various interests throughout both the Russian River and Eel River watersheds, there was a decision made that there was enough interest to look at forming some type of group, which we are now calling the Russian River Water Forum, to see if we could explore some solutions. So I wanted to provide a very high-level overview, just by way of background, and you probably all recall that the Potter Valley project does divert water from the Eel River into the headwaters of the East Fork of the Russian River. And it used to divert quite a bit of water. It is an over 100-year-old project. And in recent years, due to a biological opinion on the Eel River, that amount of water transfer has decreased significantly, so that now on average, instead of closer to 140 to 150,000 acre feet that used to be diverted in previous years, on average, it's 60,000, but with the recent issues they've had, not only with drought conditions and also the transformer bank no longer being in operation, it's closer to maybe 30,000, about half that, 30,000 acre feet per year. As you all are very aware, PG&E did determine that they would not relicense the project, and so we are about halfway through of their timeline for their proposal to surrender their license and put forward a decommissioning plan. And why is this important to Santa Rosa? Why is this important to our region? The importance is that that water that is transferred from the Eel River does provide water supply for Lake Mendocino and ultimately the Upper Russian River customers. Without that transfer of water, based on modeling done by Sonoma Water, 8 out of 10 years, there is not enough water to meet the needs, and in 2 out of those 8 years, Lake Mendocino is predicted to go dry. So it is in all of our interests to see if we can find some type of solution. Sonoma Water has been working on this by going out, and they received a grant from the State Department of Water Resources to look at 3 different aspects, one of which is to look at potential solutions to the diversion, which we're now calling the Russian River Water Forum, one of which is to look at resiliency solutions for Potter Valley Basin itself, and then the third grant project that they're working on is looking at the condition assessment of the facilities at the Potter Valley project. Today I'm just going to focus on the Russian River Water Forum, and what we're really looking to do through the Water Forum is to answer some questions related to the Potter Valley project decommissioning. If this project is in fact decommissioned, can we influence it in any way to save portions of it to keep the transfer going? So to that end, who would own it? What facilities would we need to keep, and would they need to be modified in some way to ensure water supply and fisheries protection? How will this be funded? Who will pay for not only the initial acquisition, but ongoing? How is this going to be financed? And what does it do to the water rights that are held as part of the FERC license, as well as the water rights that are along the Russian River when this water, if this water is no longer available? Those are the questions that we're looking to answer through this forum process. And what's been created is a structure. A lot of the feedback that was received through the interviews that were conducted is that the initial effort to try to form a partnership and a 2-basin solution partnership to relicense the project felt that it wasn't transparent and wasn't open to the public. So this is really looking at a very open process where all of those interests that were interviewed, that analysis was looked at and then made a determination to try and form a couple different groups to work on identifying solutions. One was a recommendation to have a planning group, which is at the technical level staff with a limited number of seats, although we do typically say it's 30 plus because there are opportunities for any tribal participation that would like to participate, so we have that open. A second group is a leadership council, which would be made up of elected officials. And then the way that we anticipate that this is going to work is that the planning group will be meeting in an open process. Underneath the planning group will be 4 working groups focusing on those questions I outlined before. They would propose various options. Those would go up to the planning group to see if we can come up with some suggested solutions. And then the planning group will provide that information to the leadership council. The leadership council would then, if they come to some type of idea that they can all support, or that a majority that could support, they will go back to their various elected bodies, whether it's city, county, tribe, water district, et cetera, determine if they want to participate, and then eventually those that want to participate would form whatever that new entity would be that would keep a portion of the project going. There's also a future piece, which is the Russian River Resiliency Subcommittee, and that is intended that after we hopefully can come to some type of path forward for a solution, that we will eventually circle back and look at additional Russian River resiliency options. So sort of based on this structure, I was going to explain each group. So the Leadership Council, as I mentioned, will be elected officials. And the Leadership Council has no limit on participation. The only exception is they would like one representative, one elected official from each body. So, for example, if Santa Rosa wanted to participate, they didn't want 3, 4, 5 council members, but only one to participate. That way we don't have any issues with Brown Act. But other than that, there's no limitations. So if every city in Sonoma and Mendocino County and Humboldt County wanted to participate, it's open. The Leadership Council, again, will be mostly made of elected officials, but there's also the hope that state and federal elected officials will participate, and the anticipation is they will likely send their staff as their delegate. So that will be the only exception for a staff perspective. The Leadership Council is going to consider the options from the planning group, and then hopefully, as I mentioned, see if they can come together on a potential solution that they could support, and then go back to their various governments to make a decision if they want to participate. In particular, at the Water Advisory Committee meeting on Monday, the WAC did recommend and approve having the chair, which is Mike Healy from Petaluma, who's a council member with Petaluma, and the vice chair, which is Mayor Natalie Rogers from Santa Rosa, participate on the Leadership Council representing all of the contractors. So they will be on the Leadership Council. The planning group is limited, so it's roughly 30, but open to include any tribal governments that would like to have staff participate. It is anticipated and directed to be made up of technical staff. We will have staff from county governments, tribal governments, particular water suppliers in Sonoma County, and I'll talk about that in 1 second, but we have 6 seats for Sonoma County water suppliers, environmental representatives, agricultural interests, resource conservation districts, and then we also have recreation and fisheries interests. So it's a pretty big group. These meetings will be open to the public and encouraging public participation in these meetings going forward. Specifically for Sonoma County, as I mentioned, we have 6 seats to represent water suppliers and water supply interests. So we've identified those 6 seats. We'll have a member from North County. So North County, the city of Healdsburg is going to be the representative, and the alternate is going to be city of Cloverdale. For West County, the representative is going to be Camp Meeker, and the alternate is going to be Sweetwater Springs Water District. For Sonoma Water, they'll have specific staff. Mike Thompson is going to be the member, and David Manning is going to be the alternate. And then for the water contractors, we all got together and made a decision on the 3 representatives and the alternates. So for the water contractors, it will be North Marin Water District. That'll be Tony Williams, the general manager, with Marin Water as his alternate, Paul Sellier, who's the director of water resources. We'll have Shannon Catula, who is the public works director from Town of Windsor, as a member. His alternate will be Dan Herrera from City of Petaluma. And then Santa Rosa, with myself being the representative, and then Mary Grace Pawson with City of Rohnert Park will be the alternate. So as these representatives on the planning group, we are also meeting together with all interests, all water supply interests in Sonoma County in a caucus group. And so we're planning those meetings to happen monthly and to talk through with all of the water supply interests to determine, are there areas where we're all in agreement and we can support a certain process or solution going forward? Are there areas where we may not be in agreement, but we don't need to stand in the way of the other's interests? And then are there areas where we do not agree and our interests divert? And so how are we going to represent that? So in between each planning group meeting, we're meeting every month through the caucus process to try and align where we can and identify where we don't. There will also be the 4 working group members, and the planning group members will be appointing those working group members. We anticipate, at least in Santa Rosa, I've suggested that we have Peter Martin participate water supply and fisheries, that we have Morgan Biggerstaff participate on the governance working group, and that we have Nick Harvey participate on the finance working group. So we're trying to be very well represented on all these working groups. We also know there's other water suppliers that have suggested membership as well, and we're looking to finalize that. So as I mentioned, we were in front of both the board and the council late fall of last year, and the board recommended and the council did support the following policy direction, which we will be using to direct our participation in the Russian River Water Forum and the caucus, or the planning groups and the caucus. And so that is, we are going to continue to support the transfer of the water, in particular not only for water supply reliability, but recognizing the investments that we've made in the fisheries, that we're generally supportive of some type of regional entity to acquire what's needed to keep that diversion going, that we are receptive to some type of funding, but we strongly believe it needs to be proportional to the benefit received. And we have heard from other water contractors that this is a strong desire and interest of the other water contractors as well. Any decisions regarding this are consistent with the restructured agreement for water supply, and that we want to continue to have a seat at the table to voice our interests and make sure that we're part of the evaluation of any water supply resiliency. So this will be our guiding principles as we go through and participate both on the planning group and as the mayor participates on the leadership council. In terms of next steps, the first meeting is a 6-hour meeting on May 17th in Ukiah. And then we will have a second planning group meeting that should hopefully be shorter in June. And then I anticipate July is going to be another roughly 6-hour or so meeting. So those are the 3 that are so far tentatively planned. The working groups, they're looking to have those start in June. And then, as I mentioned, we are caucusing as Sonoma County water suppliers. We are meeting every month, the 4th Thursday of every month. We are also having discussions of whether or not we want to meet with the agricultural caucus of Sonoma County and or also the Mendocino County water suppliers. So we're looking to see if we may have some mutual interest there. And then the Leadership Council is just getting started in terms of establishment, and so they're looking for various boards and councils to decide if they want to participate, to provide that information before too long, and then they're hoping to start that group in probably July, maybe August, once we have some information to provide them from the planning group. So pretty aggressive schedule, but with the looming deadline of the license surrender and decommissioning, there is a focus to try and get something going quickly if we can, to hopefully preserve any needed facilities in the Potter Valley project. And with that, wanted to let you know that there is a dedicated website. It's RussianRiverWaterForum.org, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Director Burke. I'll open it up for any board member questions or comments. Hearing none, we'll open it up for public comment on item 5.3. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Montoya.
Okay, and there's no one in council chambers wishing to make public comment, no hands raised on Zoom, and no email or voicemail public comments were received.
Thank you. Thank you again, Director Burke. It's a very ambitious schedule, and we hope things go smooth. Next, we have two items on the consent calendar, item 6.1 and 6.2. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move adoption of the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the consent calendar. Welcome back, Board Member Bartholow. We'll now open it up for public comment on items 6.1 and 6.2. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Montoya?
Okay, there's no one in chamber wishing to make public comment, no hands raised on Zoom, and no voicemail or email public comments were received.
All right, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Board Member Wright?
Aye.
Board Member Watts?
Aye.
Board Member Bartholow?
Aye.
Vice Chair Arnone?
Aye.
And Chair Galvin?
Aye.
Okay, and that passes with 5 affirmative votes with Board Members Badenfort and Walsh absent.
Thank you. We have no report items, so we will move to item number 8, which is public comments on non-agenda matters. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Montoya?
Okay, and there's no one in chamber wishing to make public comment. No hands raised on Zoom, and no voicemail or email public comments were received.
All right, that'll conclude that matter. We'll now move forward. We have no referrals, no written communications, no subcommittee reports. Do we have any board member reports? Hearing none, we will move then to the director's report. Director Burke?
Thank you, Chair Galvin and members of the board. I just have a couple items to update the board on. First, I wanted to let you all know that on April 25th, the City Council did unanimously pass approving the preliminary regional budget and the partner agency allocations for fiscal year 23-24. Finance Department is working on notifying our partner agencies, and we will be presenting that budget with the rest of the water and sewer budget to council and study session next week, and then it will go for formal adoption on June 20th. But I did want to again thank the board and especially the budget subcommittee for all of their work. It was a great, easy item at council, and Nick Harvey did a great job. So thank you again for all your work on that. I also wanted to give an update on our 14th annual Earth Day event. We were back fully in person since the onset of the pandemic, and we estimated that we had a little over 2,500 residents attend. There were 58 booths and vendors with a range of items from eco-friendly products to food and services. There were also 5 different workshops held throughout the event, and as a number of stage performances. So it was a great event. It was made possible through the support of 18 sponsors who contributed a total of $14,000 in sponsorships and in-kind services, and we had over 40 volunteers make the event run smoothly. So we got a lot of great feedback from the community as well as council members who were able to attend, and I did just really want to thank the team, and especially Alicia Quilici. It was her first year managing Earth Day, and she did a fabulous job. And then last, I did want to let the board know of a recent ruling from the California Air Resources Board. On April 28th, the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, unanimously adopted the Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation. And this requires California's fleet owners and operators to start purchasing medium and heavy-duty zero-emission vehicles beginning in 2024, with the objective to move California's truck fleets to zero emissions where feasible by 2045. And we, starting in 2024, we will be required to ensure 50% of our vehicle purchases going forward are zero emission and 100% are zero emission by 2027. There are some limited exemptions, but in general, this is going to be an impact that we are going to be having to address, not only in the water department, but citywide. We did have a lot of participation in this rulemaking, not only through our participation through the Association of California Water Agencies, or ACWA, but also staff was highly engaged through this effort. CARB did acknowledge that they will need to be open to feedback because there could be limited availability and supply chain issues. And so they are going to, their staff is going to discuss how they can keep the board informed about how this is going and whether or not they would need to get additional feedback and or need to make some changes going forward. So I just wanted to let the board know that we've been following this and we are watching this very closely. In addition, working together with the Transportation and Public Works Department, City Manager's Office, we're also working on a master plan for a fleet electrification for the city's fleet. So that will include all of our vehicles. And that we hope to get out on the streets through an RFP process in next month or so, and then bring something back for the council to likely for the council to consider. I think it's going to be a pretty hefty lift, and we'll definitely keep the board informed as that goes forward as well. And that is my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Director Burke. Any questions for the director? Yes, Board Member
Watts. Not a question, but a comment. I was able to attend Earth Day with my daughter, and it was the first time got to see it through like an eyes of a child, and she was very upset when I dragged her away, but she was long overdue for her nap and being very fussy. So, but it was just a great event, and to be back in person and see all the camaraderie with staff and the volunteers, it was really fun. So I just wanted to thank staff for a really nice afternoon well spent.
Thank you. Any other, yes, Board Member, what's your name? Right.
So zero emissions by 2027, and does that mean pretty much for us electric vehicles? And how does, and is the cutoff for like large trucks and backhoes and things like that separate?
So the purchases going forward, the purchases starting in 2027 are supposed to be all 100% zero emission.
Purchases, okay.
Correct. There are some limited exceptions and exemptions, especially for utilities. And so there are going to be some heavy machinery where if it's just not available, we would have an exemption because they just don't make that. But otherwise, yeah, it's something that's been watched very closely because it is going to have a significant impact and significant changes on our fleet going forward. And also the structure that we'll need, the infrastructure to make sure we have charging capacity for all these vehicles as well.
Yeah, I see a large CIP project building EV support infrastructure. Thank you.
Any other board member questions or comments? We'll now open it up for public comment on item number 13. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Montoya?
Okay. There's no one in chamber wishing to make public comment, no hands raised on Zoom, and no voicemail or email public comments were received.
Very good. That concludes our agenda, so we are adjourned. Have a nice afternoon.